Okay, news of the day. It is Wednesday, January 8th. I want to start this video by thanking Ola Albertson on Patreon. That is Albertson, right? Yeah, it's Albertson. Scoop on Patreon and Seth Douglas for their continued support. Thank you. That being said, let's jump into some news of the day material and get into the most unsurprising news of the day, which is Justin Williams has signed for the rest of the year with Carolina. So it happened. And it happened right around the time where I thought it had to happen. I'm like, well, it's got to happen this week, right? And here we are. So, surprise. And I thought it was interesting too when I saw people saying, oh, this team could use him, this team could use him. And I'm thinking, no, he never really left the Carolina organization. Not really. He was at Carolina games. He was up in the stand. He's clearly following that team, nobody else. There wasn't any interest on his behalf to play anywhere else. He just decided to take the first half of the season off. Now he's coming back for the second half. We'll see how long it takes for him to get into game shape and who he pushes out of the lineup. You've got another forward, so somebody has to get pushed out of the lineup. And this improves Carolina's depth at a time where they already look like a playoff team to begin with. So Justin Williams is back in the National Hockey League. Try to contain your absolute, complete, and total surprise regarding his return. I'm not surprised. I'm less than surprised by his return. Just a little bit less. Okay, so last night Ryan Lindgren, he throws a hit on Jonas Donskoi. No call in the play. So Colorado's like, okay, that's BS. And so they throw Nazem Kadri out there, and Kadri gets an instigator penalty for taking him down. One thing I've noticed this year, guys aren't scared of the instigator anymore. It certainly doesn't seem to be that way. There seems to be a lot of instigator penalties going on. So the penalty that everybody has railed against, the penalty that when it came into the NHL, Don Cherry said this is going to kill the game kind of thing. It seems like with penalty killing being really pretty solid and just teams saying, you know what, we'll go down 2 minutes in order to deal with this situation. In that moment, Nazem Kadri's like, all right, I'll beat him up. And so he beat up Ryan Lindgren. And that's the only way to put it, is that he went out there and he instigated and he finished. And he did what the NHL didn't do. He penalized Lindgren for the hit. Lindgren ends up leaving the game with an upper body injury. And now he's going to have a hearing. So again, we see referees in a situation where they don't call a penalty, and the NHL brings them in for a hearing. I do know that the NHL doesn't talk about any discipline for referees or anything that happens of that nature, but I do know it happens. It does happen. Whether it's a phone call, whether it's a meeting between themselves and the head of officiating, these guys are monitored and they're graded every game. And so the NHL doesn't like to see this, where it's a penalty that didn't get called and a team feels that they have to take matters into their own hands, which Colorado went, okay, we'll take matters into our own hands. And it's an ugly situation. That's what the instigator was brought in to kind of curb, was that vigilante mentality, which many hockey fans enjoy that part of hockey, but it is something that they want to see out of the game. It's part of the reason too why you can't go out there and criticize officials if you're a coach. They want to keep that kind of stuff in-house. So if you have something negative to say about officials, give the league a call and talk to them about it and have the league do some sort of an investigation on it. Which again, we as the public, we don't find out what goes on behind the scenes with that. There are a lot of things with teams and the league in general we just don't hear about because they don't think it. There's two reasons you're going to cover that up. One, it's not something you would feel that the public needs to know, and two, it's going to lead to all kinds of other problems. So you have to, at least on the public face of it, say we have full faith in our officials, and then privately you can say that was stupid. What were you doing there? That should have been a penalty. But you don't come out publicly and say it. Lafreniere, let's talk about the draft for just a brief moment here. Alexis Lafreniere is still ranked number 1 for the draft. He is going to be the number 1 draft pick. I can't see any situation where he's not, unless somebody gets that number 1 draft pick and number 2 and decides to draft Byfield first and Lafreniere second, which Ottawa might do to be contrarian, but I doubt it. Byfield is number 2, and I don't see a situation where he necessarily drops either. Scouts will point out Byfield's younger than Lafreniere, so whatever happened at the World Junior Championship is all nice, but it's not necessarily a damning indictment of Byfield. There have been plenty of players who've been cut from a World Junior team, not played much for a World Junior team, that go on to have very solid NHL careers. Sometimes being snubbed by a Team Canada, Team USA being snubbed at a junior level leads to you having a much better career in the NHL. Brett Hull, who played for the US early on, he felt snubbed by Team Canada. And I'm trying to think if it was juniors. I know there was something that happened there, and Brett Hull, who I believe had dual citizenship at the time anyways, well, I'll play with the Americans. And he wore a U.S. jersey from then on. So sometimes being snubbed in a world tournament and in something like that, it can inspire a great season out of a player or a great career. So we'll see what happens from this for Byfield, but I don't see any situation Lafreniere isn't number one. Because I can't see a team taking the risk of passing on Lafreniere. I just can't see it. Where he becomes everything people think he's going to be, and you passed on him. Joseph Blandisi's on waivers for the Pittsburgh Penguins. This is a good sign. It means that Crosby's almost back. It means that they're getting healthier. And, it's about time. Pittsburgh's been through so many injury problems. And it's just all been freak injuries. And so if Blandisi's on waivers, I would expect him to clear. And then we'll see how long it takes for Crosby to be back. They're not rolling out sometime this week, him being back. So we'll see. Donskoi, based on the hit from Lindgren last night, it looks like he's very likely concussed. They're saying upper body injury, but it'd be a concussion from where he got hit, I'm thinking. I don't know, jaw? Maybe his jaw, but probably a concussion. Hopefully he's not out for very long. And it's the absolute worst time for Donskoi to get hurt, because he had been cold lately anyways, and now being hurt on top of that, it's just bad news all over. They haven't, at the time I'm recording this, given a timeline for how long he could be out. I also wanted to talk about, I'm wearing the Columbus Blue Jackets jersey. There's a reason for that. I do agree with Columbus fans, we don't talk enough about the Blue Jackets and how well they're playing. They are playing pretty darn well. 9-game point streak now on the road. And I talk about point streaks now, they can be a little bit misleading because their overtime losses are still losses, and shootout losses are ties, but overtime losses are still, 3-on-3 hockey. But you know what? Props to Columbus. They've got themselves into a tie now with Philadelphia for that last playoff spot. And they look like a playoff team right now. They've done this without superstars, and I think that's part of the reason why the media doesn't cover it. They don't have a big name that people are going to click on in a headline. Columbus is not a big driver. I can say this as somebody who's run a channel for over 3 years talking about hockey teams. There are certain hockey teams that I know if I do a video about them, they're not going to get very many clicks. And Columbus is one of those teams. Unless it's the massive winning streak they had a couple of seasons ago. But even then, it was a lot of comments of they're not that good, they're not going to maintain it. They're still going to be out in the first round. I don't know why we're talking about this. So Columbus does have some naysayers, and right now they're kind of proving them wrong, but we'll see how long this goes on for. Right now, they look pretty good. Ottawa news. Jaros got hurt during last night's game. Jaros' injury isn't supposed to be too bad. Hope not. Nick Paul, however, is out for at least 2 weeks. Lower body injury. And they're not saying a whole lot else about it right now. And Nick Paul was in there as an injury replacement to start with, I believe. So it's just more injuries for Ottawa. This isn't anything new. I do wonder if Bobby Ryan's going to be rejoining the team at some point soon, because we kind of forget that Bobby Ryan left the team to deal with some stuff for himself, and hopefully he's getting okay and he can come back and play soon, because Ottawa needs players, and they could use a good story like Bobby Ryan coming back and playing like, Bobby Ryan. So yeah, Nick Paul being out for a couple weeks, somebody else will jump into that spot, and we'll see what they do. I also want to discuss Detroit briefly. We don't talk much about Detroit other than, Detroit sucks. They hope they draft first overall, but if they don't, then it's a disaster. I think there are some positives with Detroit. Zadina has been playing very well. He is playing very well. He's showing some special teams prowess, and he's becoming that forward that they drafted early. Fabry has also been excellent since coming over from St. Louis. His scoring is intermittent, and his defense is sometimes suspect, but he's been pretty darn good. And then there's Hronik, who has been a really solid defenseman. So there are bright spots in this season for the Detroit Red Wings, and we'll see if those bright spots are still members of the team 12 months from now. There could be major change by Steve Yzerman after this season's over. I guarantee you he is evaluating each and every player on that team and deciding who's going to be there and who's going to be gone this coming fall. Nick Cousins has been fined for a cross-check on Mike Green of the Detroit Red Wings from last night's game. I didn't put up how much the fine is because it's not much. It's like $2,200 American. It really isn't very much. It's basically just a slap on the wrist, kind of a, okay, now knock it off. So hopefully Cousins knocks it off. And we'll see what happens. The cross-check on Green was penalized. So there's a fine on Cousins for something that was penalized, and there's a hearing for Lindgren on something that wasn't. So again, that's where I still say the NHL definitely has some kind of a situation where they sit down with referees and talk to them, and they go over them, probably go through game footage, but they just don't do it publicly. Because again, no good can come from that. Mike McCarron is traded, of course, was traded yesterday by the Montreal Canadiens to the Nashville Predators for Laurent Dauphin. It's a trade of a late first-round draft pick that didn't pan out for a prospect that was highly thought of at different points and really hasn't panned out at the NHL level either. So you could make the argument McCarron was a flop or he's a bust. McCarron was a late first rounder. The first rounders, anybody drafted after, I'll say like 20, 21 in the draft, the odds of them becoming a superstar, it's still there. You still have your Kuznetsovs, Pasternaks, your Brock Bessers and whatnot. But the odds of getting that superstar player drops. Further down the draft you go. So for Montreal, it was just they drafted late. They drafted a player who was seen as a first round-ish type player at the time that McCarron was drafted, and I kind of understood what Montreal was doing at the time. And so they move on and they pick up Laurent Dauphin, and we'll see if he comes up and plays for Montreal at any point this year. Montreal is a team that desperately needs to make some changes right now. This morning, Adidas released the NHL All-Star jerseys for this year. All right, so I'm going to use my phone again. The All-Star Game jerseys are basically, it's a single color logo on a blues-themed background. Somewhere Mike Keenan's going, they did it. Well, at least there's no trumpets. So, there's no trumpets, but it's a blue note, and you can see. Let me turn down the brightness on the phone for a second here, so you guys can see it. The gray stripes on the white jersey, and yeah, the grayish stripes on the dark jersey as well. They're okay. They remind me of some of the fashion jerseys I have that are single color. They're all right. I don't know if I'm going to bother with them. I like the parlay jerseys I got from last year. I think I've fulfilled my All-Star quota. So unless I saw some through Ben H Sports where I'm like, that would be really nice. And I haven't seen any of these that I go, that's really nice. Even the Winnipeg one, Yvonne was kind of like, it's not that great. Minnesota's okay, but Minnesota's logo always looks nice when it's a single color. So, so those have been released, at least the images of them. We'll see whether or not they actually release any of the actual jerseys in time for the All-Star game. And last item, but not least, is Bill Daley, who says that player skipping the All-Star game is troubling. It's a concern. Yeah. I think it's more of a concern when you've got these players who just don't think it's worth going to. They've shown already that teams win money when they win this thing. The money's not enough. And since the bye week has been scheduled around the All-Star game, which I think is fantastic. I think scheduling the bye week around the All-Star game is perfect. While scheduling around the All-Star game and putting the bye week there is perfect, it also means that you're telling a player, well, we're going to have to suspend you the game before or the game after, which means the guy will be saying, so instead of getting 10 days off, I'll get 12? Shucks. Whereas if they go to the All-Star game, they get maybe 3 days off, go to All-Star weekend, and then get a couple of days off and go back to work. So See, that's the thing, and I can kind of understand why players are saying I'd rather not, because they're talking, they're looking at the schedule, and their teammates are going to all be talking about, hey, what are you doing with your week and a half off? Oh, what are you doing with? Oh, never mind, you're going to the All Star game. Ha, you're going to the All Star game instead. Sucks to be you. So that's there is definitely a problem, and I don't know if moving the All Star game and when it is, I don't know that it would help. But I think the NHLPA and the NHL themselves need to sit down and talk this out because it is an issue in a league that doesn't promote its superstars enough. And I know people are going to say, well, TSN and Sportsnet, they're always talking about Matthews and McDavid. Right. But the NHL in general itself doesn't promote its superstars like other leagues do, and that's a problem. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below regarding this or any other topic I've discussed. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for your time. I will talk to you again soon.